What is going on, fellow web developers? My name is Tyler Potts, and in today's video we're going to be building this Vue JS Nhost application. This is using Nhost as a backend and GraphQL. I'll explain that more in a moment, but first let me walk you through this application. So we're going to be building this Nhost app. Now you're going to be able to log in or register for this Nhost app so you can create your own notes per account. So all the notes will be dependent on your account, so you only see your own notes. So we can register an account, let's say my account at test.com, whatever your email address is, and then you can put in a password. I'm going to just say test1234 and hit register. That's going to register me and log me straight in. That's all using Nhost. Again, I'll explain that in a moment. And there you go. You can see my notes app here is now logged in. We can log out if we want to, or we can create a note. So let's say my note. Say, welcome to my first note. And then we can put under here, this is cool. And let's hit create note, and there you go. You can see my note is here. We have a delete button here. Welcome to my first note. This is cool. We can also create a second note, say second note. So Sugoi, wow, amazing. Create note, and there you go. You can see this one is now first because the latest one will always come first, or you can change this order, but I'll show you how to do that inside the code. And there you go. So we can also delete notes. Let's say we didn't like our second note, we can just hit delete. That note will go and we'll be left with this first note. And this is all doing it through GraphQL and Nhost's backend surface, which is absolutely amazing. So let's log out of our application here, and we can log into, let's say, my account at gmail.com. And then we'll just put in our test1234 password, log in, and there you go. You can already see I already have notes here, which were made earlier, and there you go. So we can actually hit delete. We can then hit delete on this one, and now I no longer have any notes, and I can create new ones. So you can see what we can do in this application. It's pretty awesome. So let's actually build this. Okay guys, so I just want to talk to you about the sponsor of this video, Nhost. We're going to be using Nhost for this video. It's an awesome surface. It's similar to Firebase, which uses GraphQL. It's really good so far. I've been using it for over a week now, and it's been absolutely amazing. You can see here, it's an open source Firebase alternative. You can do data, you have a database, it uses the GraphQL API, you have authentication out of the box, which is super easy. As you can see down here, you get your Nhost client, you basically give a URL which Nhost provides you once you sign up, and then you can log in with a simple command like this. And then you can also do requests to your surface also like this, which is super easy. You can see here, this is, you've got all these different features here. It uses Hashira as an interface for you, which is really useful. I've been using it just to take a look into the actual backend. We have authentication for sign-in users. You can also do magic links, SMS, Google, Facebook, and a lot more. I will show you those options later. And it also works with all front-end frameworks. It has a JavaScript SDK, along with a Vue JS, React, Nuxt, Svelte, Flutter, Next.js, and a bunch more, which is absolutely awesome. A lot of people have high recommendations of it. So without further ado guys, let's get into this video. Okay guys, so the first thing we want to do when building a new project with Nhost is we want to create an account. So what we're going to do is click on get started, and that's going to ask you to create an account. Now I already have an account, so I'm just going to log in. Okay guys, so now I'm logged in. You will not see this default app here, however I already have one. That's what we use to show this test application. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new app in this, and we're going to call this the YouTube Notes app. We're going to use default workspace, and we're going to change the location to wherever's nearest to you. I am in the UK, so London is the closest to me, and I'm going to start on the starter package, which is pretty generous to get testing and try out your thing, of 1 GB database, 5 GB file storage, and 10 GB of network traffic. So let's hit create app. This takes a couple of, it says here it takes about 25 seconds. It's about that, so we'll wait for that to do. Okay guys, actually that's now finished. We have our workspace right here. We have our backend URL on the right here, and a bunch of things. This also has version control, so you can actually hook it up to a Nhost, to a GitHub repository and have version control. I'm not going to go over that today, but that's pretty cool information. And here you go. So this is what you're given when you first start. We could also hit data and open Hashiera. It's a dashboard. We can edit our schemas and permissions. We will need to edit our permissions soon and add a schema in there for our notes. We have our users, which will be anyone who signs up, our authentication settings. So we actually need to be in here. Now, I'm going to uncheck only allow users with verified emails to sign in, just because I don't want to have to go to my email and sign in. I'm going to uncheck magic links because I don't also need to use magic links. However, you can recheck these and try them out for yourself. This basically means you can't log in until you've gone to your email address and clicked verify that this is my email address. You've probably done it loads of times before with other applications, so they have this built in. It sends you an email. It's super useful. I'm just not doing it for this video because it will slow us down. And you can also make the passwords more secure by making them sign up and not be haveibeenpwned.com. You can also have Google, GitHub, LinkedIn, Facebook, Spotify, Discord, and Twitch providers to actually allow you to sign in as single sign-ons, which is pretty awesome. So the first thing you want to do is enter your client URL. Now with us, we're going to be using localhost 3000, but if you're planning to do it separately or slightly different way to how I'm doing it, please make sure your URL matches in the client URL. Redirect URLs is a similar thing. That's for when we use the verified email. When you click it, it'll redirect you. You probably want to set this also to localhost 3000. I'm just going to leave that as default for now. So under advanced settings at the bottom here, you can actually see you could disable new users, so new users can't actually sign up, but only people can sign in who already have an account. Multi-factor authentication, so they need something like 2FA, or this is multi-factor MFA, which is pretty awesome. Graphatar, so this will generate, I believe, a enable graphatars as avatars for your users, which is pretty cool. So you can have avatars already set. I'm going to hit save down at the bottom left here to save what we've changed so far, which was just turning this off. We can also go to roles and permissions, and you can see there's a me role and also a user role. We need to actually make note of this user role because the default role is the user role, meaning any new account will be set as a user. Me role, I believe, is for me, or the person who created this application. And then you also have SMTP, but you have to go to the pro plan to use that, which is your email settings. So now we've done this and we know our roles, what we want to do is go to data and open Hashiera. You want to copy this admin secret, copy it, open Hashiera. It's going to start trying to open it up. Enter your Hashiera secret, click enter. I'm just going to not save that. And there you go. This is the dashboard. We're just going to close this changelog down here. And this shows you a bunch of different things you can already do, author role in your queries. If we go to our data, you can see there is two things here. There is an auth section where we have our users, where they will be stored. You have our user roles, user providers, roles, which you can see here. User is our default role. Refresh token providers, and a lot more here, which is all to do with the authentication of the Nhost application. We then have storage, where you can store your files. Now you may see public here, but this is where you will store your tables, your own schemas and things you want there, which are open to your API. So what we want to do is create a table, and this table is going to be called our notes table. I'm not going to add a table comment for this one. However, we do need a few columns. Now, one of them being an ID. And this is going to be an integer which auto increments, and it's going to be unique, and it's also going to be our primary key. So there you go, that's set there. We're then going to need a title, which will be a text field. It cannot be nullable, and it does not have to be unique. We can then have content, which will also be a text field, which is also there. We then want a user ID, which I'm going to set as a text field. You can also use this UUID, which is what our IDs are stored as, but I'm going to use text because it makes it easier to query it. And it's not an issue that you're storing it as text. There's no security issues or anything like that with doing so. So we're going to store it as a text, and we don't need to make this unique because that would only mean, if you made this unique, it means only one user could have one note at a time. And then we have ID content thingy, and we need one more, created, and this, or created at, I'm just going to leave it at created. This is going to be the day it was created, and this is going to be a timestamp, and we can use a function called now to get the current timestamp. And there you go. So that is now all set. We can now hit add a table to basically add the table. So this is now generating a table. You can see it's loading up here. Hopefully, if we click, there you go, you can see we've got our notes table here. So we can insert rows in here to insert them ourselves. We can also set these as default. So these ones will just use the default value, which is automatic for ID, and this one is an automatic date. You can also see here, you've got your title, text, and content if you want to add your own. You can modify the table, set relationships, and work on permissions. Now, currently, only users who have the admin permission, which we don't even have in our account to start with. You can see here, there's no admin. We could create an admin one, but we're not going to. We're going to actually use the user role here, and we need to set the permissions. So we want to allow them to basically have all of this. They should be allowed to insert, select, update, and delete all of their roles. So we're going to select without any checks. We're going to toggle all and click save permissions. And I'm just going to do that with every single one. So I'm just going to select, toggle, save, update. I'm going to select this one. I also have to select this post update here. Toggle all and save permissions. And finally, in the delete, we just want to do the same, save permissions. And there you go. So now we can insert, select, update, and delete. You may want to change this. You may want to say, okay, I don't want them to be able to get everything, and you can set some rules in here. But for this purpose of this tutorial, I want to show you using every feature. So there you go. So now this is all set, we've got our permissions set up, we have our rows all ready to go. We now need to create our Vue JS application. Now we're going to be using feet to do this, and I've already opened a folder, new folder inside of Visual Studio Code. So what I want to do is I'm going to open up my terminal. I'm just going to clear what's in there, and I'm just going to say npm create feet at latest dot. Now the dot means create it in our current directory. I'm then going to say space template and set it to Vue. This is going to select the Vue template. You could also go Vue TypeScript if you know what you're doing with TypeScript. I'm going to use JavaScript for this tutorial, and we're going to hit enter. That's going to create us a feet application using a Vue template. It's going to ask for a package name. So this is going to be YouTube Notes app. And there you go. You can see this is now all set here. Now we actually want to install some dependencies, and I'm going to just quickly drag over a URL here. You can see this. I will put this URL in the description, and we basically want to install Apollo GraphQL. Apollo is a package, a client available to nhost as a package, and the Vue client. It basically makes working with GraphQL a lot simpler, so you can do stuff like this to actually query books, for example. So let's install all of these. So I'm just going to copy this, and I'm going to paste that in there and hit enter. That's going to install everything we need for that. We're also going to want to, let's make this full screen while we're here. You can also see here, this is the documentation on nhost. It's very well documented. You've got every single thing here. They also have a Discord server, which I joined to ask a question because I got stuck myself, and they were super helpful and got me fixed within like 5 minutes. It was incredible speed. Congratulations on how quick they did that. And then we're also going to use this Vue router here to actually do our authentication. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy this. You don't have to copy, you can just write out, I'm just lazy. And we can do npm i Vue router to actually install Vue router as well. So let's clear that. Let's go into our source and let's click on main. Now we want to do a few things in here, and the first one being we want to also install Tailwind. So we're going to say npm install -d Tailwind CSS at latest, post CSS at latest, and auto prefixer at latest. And just hit enter, and that's going to install all of those for us. So we're going to get those. I'm going to open up another window here called the Tailwind and Feet Guides. I will put this link in the description. I always use this. The next command is this one here. So let's just go back to our tutorial here. And now that's installed, we just want to run npx tailwind init -p. The -p just means set up a post CSS config as well as a Tailwind config. Now, if we go back here, we can copy this second line here, copy this whole thing, go back here. And once we've got our Tailwind config, we can just paste. I think I accidentally just copied there. Let's just copy this again. And let's just paste that in there. There you go. So now that's going to look at only Vue files, JavaScript, TypeScript, and whatever else we need. It's not going to look at any unnecessary files. So let's close that. Let's clear this. And there's one last thing we need to do. We need to create a new file. we're going to just pull it in the root. I'm going to call it new file main.css. And I'm basically just going to paste these in. We're also going to do a real quick styling here. So we're just going to say layer, which allows us to actually inject code in between these so we don't get overwritten. We're going to say component, and then I'm just going to say body. I'm going to say font family is going to be Montserrat sans serif, and we're just going to say apply background slate 800 and text white because we want it dark themed. I like dark themed. We're then going to create a main and just say apply padding of 6. That's all, just so it all has some padding. And that's all we need to do in this folder file. We are going to be using Tailwind for this just because it's quick and easy. We're not going to be worrying about styling in this. You can style it however you want. I just want to do that. Once we've done that, we can import the main.css file inside of this file too. So let's go back to that page over here and go back to Apollo GraphQL. Now we need to actually import all of this. So let's just copy this, and I will explain this in a second. So underneath this, we're just going to have our Apollo imports here. We're also going to import the Nhost Vue client, which is going to allow us to use the Vue SDK they've built for us to actually work on this application. So there you go, we've got this, we've got Apollo composables, our Vue from Nhost client, and also Apollo there. So we can save that now. Now we need to import our app from Vue. I think that's already done, that's up there. Yeah, that's just copying that. So what we want to do is create a client first. So you can see we can get this here, copy this, and paste that in. Now we can use this and we can obviously sort all this. However, I'm just going to type in the URL ourselves. So what we want to do is go back to our notes application, go back to overview and copy our backend URL. We're then going to go back to our app and we're just going to paste this in. And there you go. That's now pasted in and ready to go. Just make that so the tabbing is correct. And then we have this nhost variable here, which we're going to use in a moment. So let's go back to the guide quickly. These guides are really well documented. I'd really highly suggest using them. I'm going to then get the Apollo client. So we're going to start using Apollo. And underneath this, we just want to import Apollo. And then we want to do these steps here too. So inside of here, we're just going to provide the default Apollo client, which we brought from Apollo composables. We're then also going to provide the Apollo client, which we get from creating our Apollo client and passing through Nhost, which gives it the URL it requires. So what we're going to do is just save that, and now that is all set up. That's ready to go. We just now need to set up our router. So at the top here, I'm just going to now import, create router, and create web history from Vue router. Underneath the Apollo client, I'm just going to break this down. I'm going to say const router or routes is equal to an empty array. And this is where all our routes are going to be. You can put this in a separate file and import it, but I'm just going to do it for the purpose of this tutorial inside of here. I'm then going to set the path as slash. This is going to be named home. It's going to have the component here, which is going to be our ./Vue's home view. So we're going to create that folder. Let's also delete this, delete the components, create a new folder and call it Vues, and create a home.vue in there. Give this a template. There we go. A template, and just put a main tag in here and call this home. There you go. So we have home. What we'll do is create one more. I'm going to copy this. I'm then going to create a new file called login.vue, and this is where we're going to log in. So I'm just going to put login in there. So we're going to create, we also want to create one more thing in here, and we'll call this meta. We're then going to say protected. So you can name this whatever you want. This is protected. And I'm just going to set this to true. So if this is basically going to mean we cannot access this route. So we're going to set a rule up for this inside of our router soon. We're going to set our path to login, name login, and component Vue imports login. We do not need to explicitly say protected false because it will know that this doesn't exist, so it is false. So underneath routes, what I'm just going to quickly do is say we're going to say const router is equal to create router. We're going to pass through our history and then routes there. And that's going to get our routes in there. So now we have set up our router. I'm just going to close this side panel quickly and this bottom panel. What I want to do is I want to basically create a guard, a router guard, to stop people from getting to our protected routes without being logged in. And this is where we're going to start using nhost and some other things as well. So what we want to do is I'm going to say router.before each, and then I'm going to pass this asynchronous to, from, and next. So this basically says before we load the next route, do this first. And what we want to do is we say if to.matched.sum record.meta.protected. So we're basically saying if the record is protected, so if it has this value here, then we want to basically check if it's authenticated. So we're going to say is authenticated, meaning are you logged in? And we're just going to say await nhost.auth.is authenticated, and we'll use asynchronous. That will allow us to basically get it back without having to have a dot then or a callback. And there you go. So that's now there. So that will be in our is authenticated. We're then going to say if we are is authenticated, we're just going to say next. We're going to move on to the next one. Actually, we can say not authenticated. So if we're not authenticated, we're then going to redirect us back to the login page to tell us to log in. And then otherwise, we're just going to say, next at the bottom here. So even if this all matches and it's all good, along is I think we can return next here, and that will cancel this all out. And there you go. That will then redirect us to the login page if we're not logged in. We then need to basically tell it to use our Vue router. So I'm just going to break this down. So you can see we have our provide here, where we provide it with Apollo client and composables. We then have our nhost, and finally we're going to use our router. So we're going to say pass through our router, and then we may mount it to our app. Now to get this to work, we need to go into our app. We need to delete everything from in here and just pass in a template. And we're just going to pass through our router Vue like this. And that should allow us to basically use these pages and the router correctly. So let's actually run this now and see what happens. So let's open up our terminal here. Let's close this side panel again. So npm run def to actually start our development server. There you go. Let's open this link here. I'm actually going to break this off. I'm going to slam it to the side, select this one here, and bring this across. So you can see there, that's now there. It says we're not using any utilities class, so it's going to be missing some things. That's fine, ignore that for now. And here you go, we can see we're on the login page. So if we try to go to the just / page, you can see we're automatically redirected here because we're not logged in, which means our authentication is already working. It's sending a request to our backend on nhost, and it's saying, okay, you're not logged in. So now we need to actually allow us to log in. So underneath, above template, we're going to create a script which has the setup syntax on it. And we're going to start off by importing ref from, and we're going to import it from Vue, of course. We're then going to import use router, which is going to allow us to obviously use the Vue router. These are all composables you're able to use here. So this allows us to actually get the instance of router, which we're currently using. We're then going to import two different things. We're going to say use sign in email password, and we're going to say that is from at nhost /Vue, which is the Vue version we're using. We also want to say, we want to copy this, paste it, and change sign in to sign up. So we have two different methods. We can sign in using this and also sign up using this method here. So let's actually go down inside. So we want to get our router first. We're going to set it to use router. We're then going to check get an is register field, which we're going to set to reference of false, which means if this is true, we're going to use the register field or the register method. Otherwise, we're going to use the sign in method. So underneath register, we're going to say const email is equal to ref and just an empty string. We're then going to say password is equal to ref with an empty string, which will be our two values we use to log in here. We then want to actually get our sign up email password. Sorry, sign up, if I can actually spell. There we go. Sign up email password is equal to use sign up email password. So this is actually going to assign this here. You can actually get more from here as well. You can actually check if it's loading, if there's an error, and so forth. So we can actually copy this, paste underneath, and once again change this to be in. Now we actually want to create our function to log us in. So what we want to do is say const register or login. So we're going to create a multi-function here, which basically says if we're registered, then we're going to use the register function. If we're logged in, if we want to log in, then we'll use the login function here. So we're going to use this arrow syntax, and we're going to say if our not email.value or not password.value, we're going to return. And we're going to return an alert that just says, please fill in all fields. So this just says if we haven't filled in our email or password field, we want to not allow them to log in, because I was just going to throw an error. We then want to say constant res, which is going to be our result from calling our function. And we just want to say, basically, let's break this down here so it's easier to read. Close this bottom panel here. And here you go. So we're going to say if we are registered. So if this is true, if we swap this to true, we're going to sign up with our email and password. Otherwise, we want to sign in. And then we just check if if the result.is error, then we want to return alert res.error.message. These are all handy things that are passed back from our is register. You can also check is success as well. But if there's no error, then we can assume it's been successful. And then we're going to say router.push, and we can push us to our home page, so our logged in page. And that is all we need to do for the actual functionality. Now we actually just need to work inside of our main here. And let's start off with a nice H1 that has my notes app. We can give this classes, and because we're using Tailwind, I can do stuff like font bold, MB8. Again, you can style this however you want. For the purpose of this video, I'm going to use Tailwind to make it quicker. We're then going to say form, and we just want to give the action we create. So we want to say submit.prevent, and we want to set this equal to this function here, register or login. We can then break this down, and inside of here, we want a H3. The H3 is just going to say login or register. So just like that, login or register. And there's two things we can do here. We can either set is register to be a button we click to toggle it, or we can set it to a checkbox. So I'm just going to create an input of type checkbox, where I'll pull it in a label too. We'll model this to is register, and then let's cut this, put a label, checkbox in there, and just say register question mark. There you go. So if you tick this, that means you're registering. If not, you're actually logging in. It's slightly different to how I had it before, but I think that way makes more sense for this tutorial. We then want to get another label underneath here. Again, we don't need a for this. We're going to give this the class of block and MB4. And underneath here, we're just going to give it a span The span will be a class of block, text SM, uppercase, and MB2. And this will say email. Hey guys, for some odd reason, my mic decided to cut out, so I'm just going to quickly explain this code we've just wrote here. So we originally just entered in these pieces up here. I added some classes to them. As you can see, I added classes to this to style it, and a class to this label, and that's all I've done. After we added in this span, I added in 2 input fields. So I added in this input here of type email, a fee model email, placeholder just to say enter your email, and then a class of block with these styles here as well. This basically just styles it to look like this on the right. Once I did that, I copied this, I pasted it down here, and I changed it to say password, the type to be password, and fee model also to be password. Obviously, placeholder also password. And that's all I did there. Finally, we added this input button right here, and as you can see, we have our login or sign up here. And then all I did was I clicked register, I entered my email and password and hit login, and now we can actually access the home page right here. So we go back to home, there you go. For some reason the home bit wasn't showing, there you go. So you can see we're now logged in, it's now working and we're actually logged in. I apologize for those last 30 seconds of missing me writing out this. But hopefully you understood it. It's right here, and if you get confused, please just ask me in the comments. All we did is enter in 2 input fields to actually take our email and our password values. So when we click register or login, it will actually use those values. So now we are on the home page. We actually want to start by creating a couple of little bits. First thing we want to do is, well, we're going to want to set up a script at the top, but we're also going to go and just style this in the main. I'm going to change this to be a div, and we're going to give this a class of flex, item center, justify between, and MB8. I'm then going to put in here a H1, which is just going to say my notes app. We're going to say, give this a class of text, free Excel, and font bold. So you can see there, my notes app. And underneath this, I'm going to create a button, which will just say logout. This will have a logout feature, but for now, we're just going to say class, text, red 500, hover, underline, and we'll just have a cursor of pointer like that. So we have this logout button here. Now let's actually get it working. We're going to give this a click event that says logout. So now we need to create that logout event. I want to create a script tag with the setup syntax applied, and we're going to want to import a few different things. So the first one we want to import is going to be ref, again from Vue, because we want to have our referenced variables. We're going to need the use router. We then want to say import use sign out and use user ID from, and this is going to be our nhost Vue client. We're going to also need 2 more things, but we don't need them right now to log out. So we want to set up our router. We want to get our sign out button. So we're going to say sign out. And that's going to be equal to use sign out. We then want a constant of user ID, which is going to be equal to use user ID. We're going to want a reference to our new note. Again, we don't need this right now, but I just want to add it in ready. So we're going to have a title element reference, and also a content as well. Now we're going to create our logout functionality. So let's say const logout is equal to an arrow function where we say sign out, and then we just go router.push /login, and that's all we do. So this here is going to sign us out using nhost sign out method, and it will redirect us back here. Now if we refresh, if we try to go to, or even try to go back to home, you'll see it redirects us back to the login page. Okay guys, now we can actually log in. We want to start working on the actual create functionality. We want to be able to create new notes and actually view them. So to do that, let's actually go into our main section here, and we just want to basically write out a form. So let's create a form. Just delete this. We're going to add a submit binds to this with a prevent. We're not actually going to do anything with this yet, but we will add a handle create method to this later on. In here for now, we just want to set up a label, and we're going to give this the class of block MB4. And we're just going to call this title. Essentially what we're going to do is we're going to go copy this login, and we're going to copy this in here. So with that label should be like this, and there you go. So we're just going to change this to title. We want to set this to be text. We will also want this to be our new note. So we want to go in here, new note dot title, to bind it to the title property. Enter what's the title, there you go. And let's actually log back into this since we logged out. So let's log back in. So now we can actually test our login. So if we hit login, there we go. You can see we can now see this title. Then I want to copy this. I'm going to paste this underneath, and this is now going to say your content. And this will no longer be a, it will actually be a text area and not a text field. And we're just going to set this to be a text area like this. Inside of here, let's break that down. Inside of here, this is going to say content. We don't need a type on this anymore because it's a text area, everyone. And in here, we can say write your content, just like that. And here you can see we have a content box here we can add to as well. Finally, we just need an input field. We can actually just copy this from, again, the login form. So go to login, copy the input, close this, close that. And we just need to change this to say something like create note, save. And then we have a little create note button there. So now we can actually run this. But how do we actually save to our note? Well, we can now go up to our logout. Underneath our logout, and we're going to create a new function we're going to call handle create. But before we do that, we need to import two other things. So up here, underneath our Vue host, we want to say import use mutation and use query. So these are two composables from Vue Apollo composables. We also need to import GQL, which is how we write the actual GraphQL language. And this is from @Apollo client /core. So once we have those, we need to go underneath our logout, and we want to basically get something. So we're going to say constant, not cost, constant, and we're going to destructure loading, result, and refetch, and that is going to be from our use query. So use query allows you to make a query to our GraphQL database. So in here we're going to say GraphQL. We can then pass these backticks, and inside of here we can actually write our query. Now when I write my query, mine is going to be syntax highlighted because I have a GraphQL plugin installed. This one here, this GraphQL by GraphQL Foundation, that allows it to be syntaxed like this. So if you want to have the same syntax highlighting as I do, I suggest installing this extension. Let's close that sidebar. And then in our query, we can write some different things. So all queries start off with query. Now this is just a way of saying this block here is a query, and then we pass through what table, what sort of thing we're trying to get. And our table is our notes. So inside of our notes, we can then actually ask for something back. So we want all our notes with an ID, a title passed back, the content, and we can also pass back created as well. And all these fields will be available inside of our note. However, what we want to do is we want to order this by something. So inside of our notes, we can actually pass parentheses before that. I'm going to break this down, and inside of here, I'm going to say order underscore by, and then we can pass in a little thing. And we can then give a property. So this property we're going to choose is by created. You could also do title, because it would order it by the string or the name. But for this one, we're going to order it by the day it was created. And we can set this to descending or ascending. For this, we want the latest ones to be at the top. So we're going to do it by descending. We can then do a comma, and we want to do where. So this is going to be where our user ID is equal, so EQ or underscore EQ is equal to, and then we need to pass through a variable, which is our user ID here. So how do we do that? Well, with the Apollo use query, we can actually pass through variables. So there's a second parameter to this use query, which is an object of variables. And in here, you could just say user ID, and we can set that equal to our user ID from up here. Now, because it's the same name, we can actually just delete that and pass through the user ID like this. Now, inside of our query, we need to actually tell it we're passing through variables. So we want to say user ID. We want to give this bit here the same name as what we're passing through. So this is actually equal to doing this. Dot value is actually what we need to do and pass through the value to actually get that. So I actually need to do this to get the value. So we need to give it the same name as this, but with a $sign in front. Then we need to give it a type. So the type is going to be a string. And that's what we're passing through here. You also need to make sure this exclamation mark is at the end. Now, it says there's some sort of error here, and that's probably because I have missed something. Hey guys, I saw this error come up and it completely confused me, but I have just realized this is because we have not passed through this ID yet. So now all we do is say $sign user ID like that to actually add it to that. And there you go. So now this is back to working again. This is looking good, and it looks like it should now work. So what's happening here? So this loading stands for our notes are loading. The result is actually what we get back, and refetch mean we call it is a function that we can call to refetch everything again if we need to. So the issue is you're going to be using queries like this quite often. You might want another set where instead of getting notes, you get, let's say, books. So you're going to want to rename these. To rename these, we can do a colon and say loading notes, or I'm going to do notes loading. We can also then do notes result, and also notes date, or notes refetch. Just like that. So then we can just all this is saying is rename it to this, so we're not getting, these don't keep getting lost. So then once we have those, we can go back into our main underneath our form, and we can actually get our notes displaying. So for now, let's create a div which has a fee if not notes loading. So if our notes is not loading, that means it's actually got them, and we can just say notes result dot notes. Save, and hopefully we should have nothing there because there's nothing in our actual database. If we go back here, we can browse rows, and we can see once this loads, there should be, close this again. There we go. There should be nothing here. That means that's not working. I'm going to go to auth users and grab this ID quickly. I'm going to go back to public storage notes, and I'm going to insert a row. First thing I'm going to do is pass the ID. I'm going to say my first note, and the content will be my cool note. Let's just hit save, and that should insert it into the database. There you go. You can see that's there. So if we now go back to our Vue app, close this one. This is the wrong one. We want this one here, and open up our code and refresh. You can see we now get our notes here. So you can see our note is actually displayed. If we was to do this under a different user ID, it would not appear here because we're looking for the ones which match our own user ID. So we're just going to delete this, and now we're going to write out a new div, and this div is going to have a v4 on it. We're going to say note in notes result.notes. We're then going to give this a class, and we're going to set this, let's break this down just so it's easier to read. And in the class, we're just going to say relative. We want it to be relative with a background of white, a text of slate 700, rounded LG, padding 6, and margin bottom 6 as well. Now we've got that, we just want to add the button in. This button is how we're going to delete our note. And we're just going to give this a class of text red 500. We're going to make sure it's absolute. We'll say top is going to be 4 and right is also going to be 4. We actually need to make it 6, sorry. 6 and 6 because that's going to match our padding. And then we just want to say font bold and then pass in here saying delete. Save, and there you go. You can see we've got that delete button there. Now underneath this, we actually want to add our content. So we're going to start off with a h3, which just has our note.title. Save, and there you go. You see my note.title. Now underneath this, we want to add in our p note.content, Michael note. And finally, we want a div, which is going to have our note.created. And there you go. However, this doesn't look cool, so let's style it up. So our H3 has a font bold. We want it to be bold so it stands out and make it bigger. And then we're going to set a margin bottom of 4. So there you go. The note looks a lot better. Let's also break these down so they're easier to read in the code. And same with that, cool. So then this one, we want to have a class of text LG, text gray 500 and MB4. There you go. And finally, in this one here, we want to say class is text SM because we want it to be smaller, text gray 500 and italic. And there you go. However, this isn't formatted right. No one really can read this properly. I know that's the date and that's the time, but we want this in a more readable format. So what we want to do is we want to pass this through a convert to date method. And let's go create this method. So up here, in our script, we're just going to say convert or const convert to date. Set that equal to pass through a date. We don't need the edges here. It's an arrow function. And then we can just say return new date.to locale string. And hopefully, there you go, we get a much nicer date to read there. Although it's not perfect, you can make that look a lot better. This is something a lot easier to read. We're also going to create one more, well, we're not going to do it right now. I'll show you why in a second. So let's actually be able to create notes now. So on our form, I'm going to give this a class of MB8 to push down these notes further down away from that. And there you go. So we've got our note. We're going to add our delete function soon, but first let's actually create more notes. And we want this create note to actually start working. So how do we do the create note? Well, we need to use the mutation, because mutations are how you change stuff inside of a GraphQL based database. So what we're going to do is we're going to say const, and again, this is similar syntax to what we did up here, but this is going to call mutate, and we're going to give this a function name called create note. We're then going to have onDone, which is a method that gets called once this method is done. So we're going to create note done. We're then going to set this equal to use a mutation. And once again, we're going to pass through a query. So we're going to say GraphQL and like that. So let's break this down. And in here, the first thing we're going to say is mutation. So just like we did for the query, we called query, we're going to say mutation. Then we're going to pass through all the things we need for our content. So what we need to pass through. And this is going to be the user ID. So we're going to need a user ID, which is going to be the type of string again. We're going to need a title, which again, type of string. We want content, type of string. And that is it. They're the 3 variables we need. We then need to use one of our methods or our mutations. Now let me show you where I get this mutation from and the name for it. Inside of our API here, you can actually see an explorer of the different methods. Now if we swap this to mutation, hit the add here, you can actually scroll down and see delete notes by PK. And if we scroll further, you can see insert notes, where we can insert notes, or insert note 1. And you can see here we want note, title, and user ID. And that shows us how we can actually call this function. So I'm going to copy this. I'm going to bring it in here and I'm going to paste this in. So now we have insert notes 1, which has an object which takes in content, title, and user. Now for this to work, we have to actually pass through our variable. So content is going to be content, our title is going to be title, and our user ID is going to be the user ID variable we pass through up here. Again, to make this neater, I'm going to break these down onto individual lines just to make it more readable. And then we can actually tell it what we want to pass back, and we just want it to pass back an ID. That's all we need. So once we create a new note, this is what's going to happen. Now, we're not going to be calling create note or anything directly into from a field because we need to pass through these values. So we actually have to pass it through to this function we're given here. So to do that, underneath here, we're going to create a handler. So we're going to say handle create note. And we're going to set this equal to an arrow function that goes if new notes.value.title or new note.value.content it doesn't exist, and it's going to return an alert that just says please fill in all fields. If we have content in there, we're going to call the create note methods we created up here, so this one, and we're just going to pass through these variables. We're going to pass through the user ID as user ID.value, the title from our new note reference, and our content from our reference. And then underneath this, we can actually call this create note done method. So this will be called once this finished. So once this is called here, once that is successful or error, we're going to get this create note done. And in here, we can actually call this notes refetch because we've added a new one, so we want to refetch the rest of the new notes. So inside of here, we're going to call notes refetch. Then we're going to say new note.value is just equal to title and content. Oh, and there you go. That should now be all set. Let's go back here and let's actually grab this handle create note event handler and add it to our submit inside of our form. So here, let's just start off by saying my second note. And in here, let's say my note is so cool. It has multiple lines. That's it, create note. And there you go. You see my note is so cool. It has multiple lines. But wait a second. Why is that not on a multiple line? That's because HTML can't pass the generic /n/n, this sort of stuff here. So to do that, we actually need to pass it ourselves. So inside of our convert here, or sorry, above our convert here, we're going to create convert to HTML. And we're going to pass through content, and then we're going to say return content.replace /ends with the break tag. And just because I prefer it like that, we're going to use it like this. So we're going to replace the content, anything in here which has a break, with a break tag in HTML. So we can copy this and then we can pass it to our note. So you see here we have create note. So like we did with date, let's put this here. This is actually going to not work, but I'm going to show you this. So you can see it's now showing that. But you can see it doesn't work because it's passing it as text and not content. So how do we fix that? Well, we can take this right here, cut it out, delete this whole little bit here and bring this up. And we can add something to our class here. Oh, sorry, not to our class, below our class, on side of this is an attachment called phi-html. And then we can actually pass that function with the content into that, which will then give us our multi-line note, which is perfect. That's exactly what we want. So now we can create new notes, and you can see they order from the latest to the oldest notes. But what happens if we want it the other way round? Well, you can come up here to our fetch methods, our query, and we can change this to asynchronous. And there you go. You can see it's now sorting by my first note, my second note has multiple lines. We can also change this to title. And you can see my first note, my second note. If we do descending, you can see my second note because this S comes after F, and obviously we've got descending. But let's put it back to created now and actually show it like this. So I seem to have crashed it for a second there, but there you go. So now that's working, but we can't delete our notes yet. We can't delete them. We need to actually use another mutation to delete them. So let's actually go underneath our create stuff, and let's create some delete methods. We'll say const mutate is equal to delete note as a method. We're then going to say on done, we're going to say delete done. We're then going to set this equal to use mutation again. GraphQL, let's just break this down so it looks a bit neater as well. And break that down like that. GraphQL, just like this, bring that up, and then we can say again mutation. We can say we want an ID which is an integer because our ID, or sorry, the post ID we set as an integer that automatically increments. So we want to pass this as an integer. We can then say delete underscore notes where the ID is again underscore equal to the ID we're passing above here. So let's break this down. Let's make this easier to read. So let's just break that down, break that down, break that down, and break that down. I know there's a lot of broken downs here. And there you go. That will now delete our note. We can also get it to return the affected rows, and this will just tell us how many rows was deleted. But because we're searching for an ID, we're actually just going to be deleting one. You could actually change this to be, if you had a done tick and you click done, and that saved it to your database, you could search for done and check if it was true, and then delete multiple rows that are done. But for now, we don't need this. So I'm just going to remove this and leave it as this. Now underneath here, we just want to say delete done. And we want to say once it's done, all we want to do is notes refetch. Because once we've deleted it, we want it to refetch and remove this note from the DOM. And that's what this will do. Now we want to call our delete note, but we're not going to create a handler for this one because we can actually pass through the ID from our inside our notes because we need to get the ID. So on here, let's break this down and say at click delete note. We'll do an arrow function to this, and then we're just going to pass through note.id. Break that down too, and there you go. That's actually going to get our notes ID and add it to this here. Just break that down so it's easier to read. Save, and let's delete our second note. So let's just refresh to make sure it's all good. Hit delete, and we have an error expecting a value for non-nullable variable ID. And that's what we're passing through here. So why doesn't it work? I probably made something super simple as a mistake, and that is because this needs to be an object with the ID that matches the name inside of this. It needs to be an object and not a single line. There you go. So let's refresh. Let's hit delete, and missing selection for notes mutation response. Oh, so this actually wants us to respond something, so we should just say affected rows, and that's going to tell us how many was deleted. So once again, hopefully third time is the charm. Delete note, and there you go. You can see it works. You can see how robust this GraphQL can be. Nhost backend is super overpowered. It's really good. It's super useful. and you can actually see how good it is. You can log in, you can basically use a database using GraphQL's query language, which is amazing, and do a bunch more. You can log in with single sign-on, magic links, and a lot more. So if you want to see more of Nhost, let me know in the comments and let me know what you want to see. But for now, guys, this is the end of the video. We've created our own notes platform where you can log in and create different notes. You can create different accounts with their own separate notes, which is super straightforward, and it's all hosted on Nhost. So I just want to say big shout out to Nhost for being the sponsor of this video. It's been a pleasure working with the Nhost platform. It is absolutely amazing, and we can actually go to users now and see our users here. If there was more users added, you can see more about them here. You can see all the stats. It's so useful. It's really awesome. Obviously, there's a lot to it, and you should definitely look into it more, guys. But for now, thank you all for watching this video. If you liked it, don't forget to leave a thumbs up, smash that subscribe button, and if you have anything to ask, then just drop it down in the comment section below. If you're new around here, you might not know that we have a Discord server where we help people out. So if you have a big bug and you need help with it, hop in the Discord server. The link is down below. Ask someone for help in our help channels and be like, hey, I need some help. And we will try to help you as best we can. If I'm available, I will try and help you. If someone else is available, they will help you. It's a super fun community, so feel free to join. And that is it for this video, guys. So thank you for watching, and peace out.